So welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining our presentation today on the skills you need to become a business trailblazer. My name is Christina Ulrich, and I'm the Executive Director of Beta Gamma Sigma, and I'm so happy to join you today as your host. My team members, Matt Plodson and McKenna Sawchek, will be helping to moderate today, so please interact with them in the chat. I'll introduce our two presenters in just a moment, but I wanted to kind of give some quick notes on the structure of today's presentation. So we want this to be interactive. We want you to walk away with actionable advice and answered questions. So in order to deliver on that goal, you'll notice obviously the chat is already going. So if you're on a computer, please join us in the chat. Let us know where you're from. Let us know what chapter you're from, maybe even what you're liking about the presentation or what you'd like to see in future presentations. Throughout the presentation today, we are going to have some times we'll stop for Q&A. So please submit your questions through the Q&A box. That just kind of makes it tidier for us to make sure we're not missing any questions. So again, questions in the Q&A and just kind of interacting in the chat. We'll do our best to get through as many questions as possible. Please be aware we are recording our live presentation today, and that live presentation will be available on BGS Career Central in the next few days. So we'll keep that recording on demand for about a month or so. Also, after our webinar today, you'll have the opportunity to give your feedback via a really short survey. So we'll thank you in advance for taking a few moments to complete that. It helps us shape the future of our programming and make sure that we're meeting the needs of our membership. So I certainly hope that you're aware of our new partnership with AICPA/CIMA. Partnership conversations with them actually started by one of our fellow members who obtained their Chartered Management Accountant designation and was so impressed with the program that he thought other BGS members should be made aware of this organization. So I want to certainly encourage you after the webinar today to go to our website, betagammasigma.org. If you go to the member benefits section, you can find more information about their programming and exclusive BGS member discounts. So of course, that brings me to our presenters. Barry Payne is Director of External Relations at AICPA and CIMA. In this role, he serves as liaison to CFOs and CEOs to understand how business and finance teams are evolving and exploring the skills, competencies, and mindset that are emerging and important. Through working in various consulting and education roles, Barry brings extensive experience helping companies build sustainable talent development programs to help business and finance professionals create more value through their organizations. And Barry is, of course, joined by Nora Luquer. She's the lead manager of CJMA University Initiatives. She's responsible for building university relationships and elevating awareness of CIMA and the CJMA designation. Nora comes from a university background like many of us, and so previously she actually worked as the Assistant Dean of Professional Studies at Nichols College in Massachusetts. So that's a quick crash course on our presenters. I will pass it over to Barry and Nora.
Christina, thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and very good night to our friend in Singapore. I hope you're well. I hope you're all healthy. I'm going to actually take off my background because I want to show you that I'm in a little part of my house that has very neutral decorations. So I'm going to open up some slides in a minute to show you what we just mean about this thing called Mise en place, everything in its place. And whilst I'm doing that, it's been awesome to kind of get a feel for where you guys are around the world. I have a question for you whilst I'm bringing this up. If you want to just chat to me in the chat bar as to what you do. So if you're working, what kind of role you have, or if you're studying, what type of degree you had, or what you graduated in. It'd be lovely to get an idea of who you are and what you do, because even though Nora and I come from the largest accounting and finance membership organization in the world, there are so many people that I deal with that are business professionals, operations professionals, in leadership positions that are not finance. And what we're talking today about is much broader than that. So even if you guys might not be in finance and accounting roles, don't dismay, because this is absolutely for you. It's absolutely for everyone. So Christina did introduce me. I just live north of London. I'm actually meant to be stationed in the US, but there's kind of a pandemic going on, and visas are hard to come by. But this is me, and this is the Miss en Place theme. A little bit of French for us guys today. And let me kind of explain why this is important to our discussion today. Now, I suspect a number of you love to cook. I suspect even more of you love to dine out. I've already given my secret away about Singapore. It's a bit touristy, I know that. But I love to eat out now and again. It's a special treat. And I kind of like to know what's going on in the kitchen. And I got to know this guy only like around the corner in one of my city's most famous Italian restaurants. I love Italian food. And his name's Antonio. He is actually Italian. And he takes his job incredibly seriously, this chef. And he's won awards and he's got the TripAdvisor thing going on. And I said, well, listen, you run such a good shop here that, you know, your restaurant is always booked out. What's your secret? And he said, Barry, although I'm Italian, I got trained by a French chef. And the French chef kept on going on about this phrase called mise en place, everything in its place. And if you think about like a busy kitchen for a minute, right, in a busy restaurant, you know, you've got to get all of your ingredients together, grouped together, so you can kind of do your dishes quite quickly. You've got to get your tools and your implements ready. You know, you've got to make everything all set out. And I said to Antonio, okay, I get that. I understand. Now I'm a logistical kind of guy. But then he said, well, it's actually more fundamental than that. It is around kind of, you know, having the right attitude and the right mindset and thinking about the customer and thinking about how they're going to leave the restaurant and everything like that. And it is about mise en place. It's having everything in its place for success. And, you know, being the leadership guy that I am, and I'm always thinking about business and all of that, I said to Antonio, well, listen, there's a lot of parallels with business life here. A lot of parallels around leadership, around organization, around collaboration, around the ingredients. And the ingredients, in my analogy, is technology and being digitally savvy. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So really the theme of this conversation today is kind of, I guess, how we get our Mise together, how we get everything in its place. And I've got a really interesting framework to share with you today. It's called the 5 C's, really to take you through a leadership journey around, you know, getting your career and getting your business goals in place. And we have a couple of things at the end that I think will help you, I hope, develop yourself and create more value. So let me have a look at the chat. I'm going to read out some of these. I love it. Okay, so what have we got there? So assistant director, university student center, her marketing degree, assistant professor of accounting, a certified financial planner. What have we got? Finishing an MBA, looking for a career path. Welcome. Senior tax manager in New York City and financial audits and estate planning attorney. Ad sales and sponsorship and revenue billing. Wow. Tax supervisor at a local CPA firm. Finance and insurance at LSU. Small business owner for a very small accounting consulting firm. Love it, guys. Love it. Quality improvement coach. God, there are so many different things. A degree towards accounting, store management at the moment. So thanks very much, guys, for you know, providing that with me. And if there are any questions and answers along the way, well, actually, you can ask the questions. I can provide the answers. Just use that Q&A bar, and I'll kind of stop in a few minutes just to see if there's anything that we need to pick up. But thank you for investing this time today. So let's start our journey together. Now, just to give you a feel for where we're at, I take my soundings and I take my intel from the best business leaders in the world. Those business leaders might work for massive companies like Walmart. Some of them work for family companies, a diversity of different industries. And we've actually created a group of business and finance professionals to give us their view of the skills and the capabilities required in the future. And at a very, very top level, this kind of just provides you with some of their leadership priorities over the course of the early summer to the early fall this year, and things that they're thinking about as they come back to understanding about how they right size their offices and they think about this hybrid work environment thing. But the thing I want to leave you with, which is going to be a theme for our conversation today, is that you see that finding and retaining talent and the need for new competencies in a team are ranked incredibly highly. I think it's an awesome time to grow. It's an awesome time to develop. There is so much that you can learn and so much that you can use to be attractive to employers right now, because employers are having a tough time. I mean, you may well have heard of this phrase that's been coined recently called the Great Resignation. I think, the pandemic has given us all time to reflect very, very deeply on our lives and think, are we going in the right course? Are we doing the right thing? Well, this presentation, to a certain extent, gives you a framework to help control that and to make some really good decisions about your career. So I want to start off by talking about the industrial revolutions. Now, how many of you guys have heard of the fourth industrial revolution? And you've probably heard of the industrial revolution and the 3.0 industrial revolution. And what's really, really interesting is that the rate of change across these different revolutions was fairly linear. But look at what's happened right now. And quite frankly, what's been exacerbated by the pandemic. I remember kind of the 80s and the 90s, and it was a big deal, guys, if you don't mind me saying, when we got things like Excel. Oh, God, what would we do without it? Word, Lotus Notes, and then the internet and the web and things. But it felt good at the time. I didn't feel too overwhelmed. It was kind of all cool. But you think about the things that we have at our disposal now. You can see some examples of that at the end, such as, cyber, such as AI, such as the Internet of Things. Oh my goodness. What you can ask Alexa to do these days is ridiculous. The role of big data, RPA, which a lot of you know stands for Robot Process Automation. I think that in this age of exponential change, there is a real fear that we actually, could be left behind. And then if you think about what's happened over the past year to 18 months, you probably have read this about a year ago, where the CEO of Microsoft famously said that they've been through 5 years worth of transformation and change in 5 months. And that's Microsoft talking. And you think about every aspect of your life over the last year and how that's changed in terms of how you interact with businesses. And of course, for those of you that are working in businesses, how you had to pivot. And, it can be kind of overwhelming, both mentally and intellectually. It's almost like technology at this point is outpacing our ability to adapt. It kind of sometimes feels like it's outpacing our ability to adapt. And it kind of reminds me, the thought leader, Jack Welch, Jack Welch of GE. He came up with this very powerful quote. And he said, and I'll read this to you: if the rate of change on the outside is more than the rate of change in the inside of your organization, the end is near. So how can we get ahead of this? Well, with some very basic planning and asking some questions and having a model, we can get our mise en place together. We can get everything in its place And we can think about things that we can do to help us grow and help us be versatile and adaptable. So everything in its place. So I'm going to show you a few little visuals, and then I'm going to go through what we call the 5 C's. And the 5 C's are, and I'll just go through them briefly and then go through them in detail in a second, is number 1, I don't know about you, but I always like to start with certainty. I always like to understand maybe some of those hard trends that are not deniable, those hard trends that we can educate ourselves about to be more knowledgeable. Or for those of you that are leaders, educating your team. And then it's understanding, well, how can we create a bit of capacity to do other things that are more valuable and forward looking? How can we leverage technology? And how can we automate things? And then the third is, when we've done that, what type of capabilities do we need to upskill ourselves in order to think a bit more future forward? And the fourth is really about added value opportunities and the capabilities that we need and how we project ourselves to create as much value as we can in the business. And the fifth one is really where I'd like to end. And it really kind of encompasses a couple of things that we've been working on with Christina and the team at BGS in terms of opportunities for you to, think through areas that you want to project, you want to grow, and start with something small and start with something that you know. So I'm going to take you through those 3 C's in a moment. But I kind of want to offer you this as a little kind of reflective tool just before we get into the 5 C's. And I call this the opportunity scout. Now, I'm going to ask you an obvious question, and it's rhetorical, so you don't need to answer in the chat bar. Are you busy? That's what I'd like to ask you. I think whatever we're doing, whatever walk of life we're in, we're way too busy. And I often kind of just reflect to myself, well, it's really a combination of challenging how much we work in our business, which is like heads down, doing the day job, just getting it done, getting stuff done, versus working on the business, understanding that our role is not part of an island. We need to collaborate. We need to seek relationships. We need to join the dots. We need to understand how our organization ticks. And then finally, working out of the business, which doesn't mean to say that you're leaving your job, but it's understanding what the CFO of Coca-Cola, John Murphy, calls outside in provocation. He wants individuals to have a look at what Pepsi's doing or what other companies are doing, providing customer perspectives and understanding your market and learning from other companies. And you see, what happens with this is we normally spend the majority of our time working in the business. But I think if we were just aware at a higher level about maybe spending a bit more time working on our business and then working out of our business, think of the value, the extended value that we can give our organizations. And I know it's easier said than done, but the reason why I'm showing you this is if we can kind of adopt a little bit of the 5 C's, then it may well help us along the way. So before I get into the 5 C's, Christina, I'm just wondering if there are any Q&As at this point. Sorry, I prepare the answers, you prepare the questions that you've got coming through from the folks out there.
We don't have any questions in the Q&A yet, but I know that the information is resonating well. I might have a question though. Would you mind taking a question from me?
No, it would be my honor.
Okay. So I'm really intrigued by the graphic that you just showed. I'm wondering, for maybe some of the people on the call who are just starting out in their careers, and it might be a little intimidating to start to work at almost breaking through some silos to work in those 3 stages. Do you have any advice for maybe where to get started?
Yeah, it's kind of especially, thinking about the students that we work with, Christina. I think it's all about you know, just understanding some of the industry trends of where of the particular area that you want to work in. And I always remember that when I was interviewing interns and interviewing new hires from school, say in finance, for example, which is my area, if they were to quote, for example, a Forbes article or a Fortune article that was vaguely related to the business that we were in, that scored heavy marks with me. The ability to then work on the business and research the company that you may be working for. Very hard to work in the business when you're not in the business. But just to have that level of just structured thinking around the company that you might be working for, and then some of the data points and some of the good press. And it'll be different for marketing, it'll be different for HR, it'll be different for operations or supply chain, it'll be different for technology, Christina. But start small. Don't eat everything, don't eat all the elephant at once. Just start small, and really, it would certainly really, really impress me as a recruiter if you did that. So that would kind of be my starting point.
That's great advice. So, sort of just building an awareness of the industry that you think you want to go into. I think that's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
If anybody
Uh,
does have any questions, please do type them into the Q&A.
so let me, Christina, talk to you guys about the 5 C's. Now, the first C, actually, which helps us with the question in actual fact, is around certainty. So for us to think about the future and be equipped with the skills that we need to kind of, really maximize the future, I don't know about you, but I always like to think about what we can predict and what is undeniable as fact. Now, this guy we do a lot of work with, and by the way, highly highly recommend his book, Dan Burrus, The Anticipatory Organization. And what he does is he first of all writes about 3 hard trends. And those are broadly government regulation, because there is, technology, and demographics. Is an undeniable fact that we all get older at some point in time. But if you were to break these down for a minute, then, I don't think that there is much argument around some of these facts and in terms of where we know the future is going. So we've already touched on the exponential pace of technology innovation. And we've also touched on it, it's been more pronounced recently, the increasing shortage of talent. But the one that I really, really, really like is number 9, and the human skills. We are not going to be overtaken by robots as a human race, but for sure, someone that's able to understand how we can leverage technology and actually bind that technology together for future success is going to be incredibly valuable in the workforce, whether you're finance or whether you're not. So I think one of the things to first of all start off with is really to understand how this relates to your world, how this relates to your industry, and how this relates to you as an individual in terms of where your interests lie. And it's good because they're all certain. There's no ambiguity. They're all certain. They're all happening right now. We can't deny that. So you start off with that and you think, okay, how do I then, for example, create a level of capacity, either my own personal capacity in terms of time, or if I'm working, for an organization, how can I create some capacity in order to future think and go future forward? And this graph is from some research that we undertook over the last couple of years amongst CFOs in the main, and finance leaders. We wanted to understand some of the technologies that they're focusing on in order to create capacity and deliver a good service to their internal customers, and identify some of the things to make their organizations more successful. And I guess that you guys may well have heard of cloud-based systems. I think certainly in our world, for you accounting finance folks out there, you'll know that a very, very important part of the cycle is the accounting close every month or every quarter. And it was so funny, like last March, last April, last May, I spoke to loads of accounting leaders. And they all said that they actually closed their books quicker than before. And they thanked it to cloud-based systems, the fact that everything was out there into the ether. But then a lot of organizations are bringing in things like analytics and more advanced analytics, and down the road, visualization. So storytelling and ways to be able to get their message across. And this is not just about finance, guys. This could be how you get a marketing campaign across, how you get a HR policy across. It could be anything. And then we get to the really cool stuff that I do invite you to sort of reach out to and lean into, like, for example, process robotics. And what this thing called robotic process automation actually means, where you can take a repetitive process in the main and really get computers to do that work and run that process through, so you don't need to do it, or perhaps you need to manage exceptions. And then you get to really cool stuff like artificial intelligence, which is the next thing, where actually the systems are learning how they can take on more. And the distributed subledger thing called blockchain. Not many of those at the moment, but mostly around cloud and advanced analytics. And the reason why I show you this slide is that, really the basis of Mise en Place and the ingredients is all around technology. And it's all around, us as a group of professionals being comfortable to explore how different technologies can work. And this gives you a kind of an idea about some of the technologies that we're seeing that are really important in business. And more about that a little bit later on. Now, something that really, really excites me is there's a Q and an A. I'm going to stop in a moment to see what wonderful wisdom has been asked. But for the moment, I want to just carry on and talk about capabilities, because if we know like the hard trends, if we then know some of the technologies that we can leverage to create capacity, we then need to think about our own capabilities and our own skills and whether there's a gap that we need to fill. Now, I work with this inspirational guy called Tom Hood. He's our Executive Vice President of Business Engagement and Growth at the AICPA and CIMA. And he came out with this awesome quote that you see. And I'm going to read it to you. And basically, it's all about L being greater than C squared. I think it's a super cool quote. So in a period of rapid change and increasing complexity, the winners are going to be the people who can learn faster than the rate of change and faster than their competition. The people that can learn faster than the rate of change and faster than their competition. And if I kind of reflect back at that Jack Welch quote that I mentioned to you guys a few moments ago, it's kind of similar, isn't it? He just took a more pessimistic tone. He said if the rate of change on the outside is more than the rate of change on the inside, then the end is near. So if we can learn faster than the rate of change and faster than the competition, then we're going to be incredibly successful and incredibly valuable. All about growth and all about learning. And it reminds me of a blog that I wrote. I spoke recently at our Chief Financial Officer conference, and it was all about what skills are the top skills and capabilities that you need. And I wrote things like, in the accounting world, well, you need to perfect your technical accounting skills, otherwise your company's going to go out of business. You need to be more savvy with the emerging technologies. We've just discussed that. really think about critical thinking and strategic thinking. But the fifth one, and this comes up more often than not, is to have a growth mindset. So people that hold their hands up and say that they're curious about learning a business thing have huge potential in those people's eyes. And I would imagine that's the same across a lot of leadership. So LC squared. And I'm going to take that question in roughly about a minute or two's time, Christina, just to give you a heads up. But this is a slide, by the way, that I spoke to at that conference that I was just speaking about. And I think this is pervasive across any industry or any profession, what we do. But really what it's saying is that in the olden days, we used to spend loads and loads of time collecting data. You know, it used to take over our world, and then we'd figure out, well, is that data the truthful data? Is it telling the right story? Can we rely on it? And everyone would have a point of view. You know, the salespeople would say, nah, you know, the revenue's too low. Other people would say, oh, your costs are too high. You know, where are you getting that from? But with really the consolidation of systems and automation, what that is doing now is that's allowing us to think about skills that we need in a different way. You know, if we take command of really understanding how the digital side and the technology can work for us, then innately we're actually focusing a lot more on the human skills element as well. We can't think about technology in an island. And that's going to be my next slide. But whilst you guys take a little read of that, because I'm going to go through it with you in a second, it's called our T-shaped professional. Christina, what's the question?
So I am not in the accounting field, so I will read this as written, and you can tell me if this is wrong.
Oh, we're under pressure now, guys.
How have you seen the RPA being used in the accounting field? And not to put you on the spot, as a secondary question, could you maybe explain to us non-accounting people what RPA is?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, it's not a line of robots like from a 1980s sci-fi. They're going to be in some sort of office somewhere. The robots actually are within microchips and computers. But essentially what it is, right? If you think of like a process, like a very, very simple process. So for example, you might be in a business where you sign loads of mundane contracts because you need to, or there could be like tax returns that you need to do that just take up time. They don't change all that much. Or there could be some transactions and invoices that you need to create that really follow the same process. But, you know, rather than someone typing it all out, you can actually create programs in order for that to be done automatically. And that really is the basis of robot process automation. But now it's getting super sophisticated. You know, if you look at, for example, you know, there are things out there that can pretty much produce financial statements and do filings. But with all of this, you know, no matter how sophisticated you go, there's always the human touch, because the fear is that we rely so much on these things, we don't know how to deal with the consequences or the exceptions. And there are always exceptions. So think of it like you might have a very basic process, things that you do which take up a lot of labor time and it's really boring. You can use robot process automation tools to be able to automate that. And then you can base yourself off the exceptions. It's actually a really, really great question. And if any of you guys have experience of this, write in the chat bar what you use it for as well. So that would be really, really interesting. And actually some of the things, Christina, we're going to be talking about as part of our partnership cover robot process automation in a little bit more detail. But listen, this is a model for us to think about, and it's primarily for finance professionals, but I think it can work for everyone. Because what we're trying to say here is that in whatever we do, we need deep-seated skills Now, in accounting and finance, that's all about our technical accounting and finance skills. But also, there's a level of deep-seated skills that we need in understanding the technologies out there and being able to work with those technologies. But the real skill sets that I invite you guys to really think about and reflect on, which quite frankly will not be taken over by robots, are these wide boundary crossing skills. You know, Daniel Burrus, he talks in his book about the anticipatory organization. Say if you had a framework of hard trends that you could understand and play out scenarios around what you think the business should be doing next. How cool is that to go and speak to people in your business about different scenarios and options? Communication and storytelling. You know, I'd be a very, very rich person if I had $1 for every time a CFO tells me I need better storytellers. And you know, they're not talking about reading like a book or a story, but we have copious amounts of data out there. How do we make the business be able to consume that data and make decisions based on, you know, some very effective modes of communication? We might have the most wonderful dashboards and wonderful pictures and slides in the world, but let's take a step back and let's think about our in, our on, our out, and think, well, what does this truly mean to a business, what we're actually trying to convey? So a lot of time being spent there. And the final one on the right-hand side that I really need to call out is integration and collaboration. And boy, guys, have we had a crash course in this over the last 18 months. And by the way, I still might put myself on mute on Zoom. I still share things that I shouldn't because I'm pressing the wrong button. But it's thinking more about, well, what does collaboration mean in the future? What have we learned that we can bring in to the next normal in a sense? What happens when we have to go back to a hybrid environment? How do we get closer to our business colleagues using digital skills and digital tools? And I offer you this to T-shaped professional as you think and you reflect on some of the skills and the attributes that you'd like to develop. And this is all, by the way, based on an independent framework that we offer to people in all lines of business. Now, before I go to the fourth C, something that I didn't mention, by the way, right at the beginning, is I love it if people connect with me on LinkedIn. And I think one of you, I hope you're there, by the way, has already connected with me on LinkedIn. So please do search me out because I speak about some of these things on my channel. So don't hesitate to invite me into your LinkedIn network. It would be an absolute honor. Now, the fourth C is really, really important. And Dan Burrus talks about this. It is about mindset. You know, and if I go back to Chef Antonio for a minute and this concept of the mise en place, it's not just about the logistical thing, about the ingredients, about the tools, about, you know, where things are in the kitchen. It's about attitude. It's about mindset. So you might know the hard trends. You might think about areas that you're curious about to create capacity for you to do really good things. You might then think about, okay, well, what are the specific skills I need in order to do that? Well, it's all about then this future view perspective. And again, it does come back to that little kind of, you know, that in, that on, that out, and sharing your future view of your products and services. And if we go back to that question, Christina, that you asked at the beginning around, okay, well, you know, are there some examples of what you guys can do in the in, the on, the in, out? You know, just having the ability to kind of go and read stuff in your industry or in other areas gives a point of view of outside in provocation that you can bring into your organizations or what have you. And that's really, really good because we all get very insular. Yeah, we all get a little one-dimensional when we work. But, you know, it's really just to be able to sort of meet your organization halfway and actually look at all of these things that are going on in the outside world. Yeah, this is where we're going. This is how we see the future. And if yours is aligned with ours, we can thrive together. Daniel Burrus. And just to back that up and just to give you a data point about mindset, about a year ago, we produced a report with the accountants KPMG. And it was called Finance Transformation, the Human Perspective. And basically the objective of this report was to say, well, listen, we know that loads of organizations are embracing digital technologies for whatever reason, but are they actually leaving the people that need to work with them behind? Are they so obsessed on investing in technological tools, paying consultants to kind of provide advice? What about the people that kind of need to grow with using those tools? And this particular chart says that if you club those two things together from the responses on the left-hand side, really 39% about how we can get people to think is about mindset. It's about the motivation of us all to embrace that change, because it is change and it is overwhelming and sometimes really, really scary. And also that growth mindset that I was talking about. And by the way, that doesn't come naturally. It's not a tap that we can turn off and off, on and off. We need to sort of almost have the right environment for us to feel like we can grow. And that's really, really important in an organization, and something we very, very much have in our own. But then it's not just about mindset, it's all about skill sets as well. And it's the combination of those both. So, along with identifying the hard trends, first C, thinking about the capacity to learn different things, thinking about the skills, it's also ensuring that you're able to have that environment, that you have got the right growth mindset. And that's a collaboration between you, between your educators, between your manager, between your staff. And that's really, really important. Which takes me to my fifth C, which takes me to kind of the how. So you've been through this thing and you think, okay, well, there are some areas maybe that I'd love to focus on, that I'm really curious about. And you see that picture on the right-hand side. This is obviously taken before the pandemic, but it was a little kind of little away day. And it was this team leaning in to learn more about data analytics. And really, this team kind of followed the 5 C's and thought, okay, well, for us to take our business forward, and by the way, this is the State Society of CPAs, but it could be any business at all. We really need to focus on what the data about our members is telling us and order that in a way we can make better decisions. But we just can't, we don't have the tools to do it. We're sort of dining off of Excel and pieces of paper. So they brought someone in to work with them, to create data sets, to create scenarios, to elevate the skills of this group. And the LinkedIn, as you can see at the bottom, the LinkedIn response was phenomenal. But the things that we're kind of seeing that are big right now: data analytics, data visualization, and, by the way, something that encompasses both is this notion of storytelling. And more about that in a second. And the ability to be even more digitally savvy than you guys are at the moment, because as I mentioned in my T-shaped professional, understanding and being curious about the capabilities of technology. I'm not saying that you need to be a techie, but you just need to be aware of the possibilities. And then the most important thing along with that, and this is my concept of integration and collaboration, is to go in the business and slightly outside of the business and think, okay, well, what does my business really need here? What problem are we trying to solve? We can't be investing in this stuff just because it's nice and it's rosy and shiny. What business problem are we trying to solve? Like that robot process automation. A lot of organizations do it to save time. And saving time allows you to redeploy your teams doing bigger and greater things, as well as actually reducing the risk of manual mistakes and connecting the dots with the business. So here we are. The key to being future ready, as I draw to a relatively soft close. I've got a bit more to show you guys, but fire up those questions if you have them. Now is the time. I love this quote, by the way, from Mike Walsh. If you automate, you must elevate the skills of your team. So it's thinking about the tools at your disposal and then thinking about engendering the right mindset to be able to be curious about those tools. And then, of course, thinking about the skills that you need, which actually then brings me to what we're doing with Beta, Gamma, Sigma. But before I do that, let's recap on Chef Antonio. Let's recap on the Mise en place. So everything in its place. So you first of all start with understanding your world, understanding the certain hard trends. I'm not very good with change. I like to first of all focus on the facts. And then it's thinking, okay, well, what areas am I curious about in terms of trends or technology to create capacity for me to then think about, well, what skills do I need to kind of figure out? What skills am I curious about? And then how you, if you're a leader in an organization, or if you're an individual in an education environment or working, how can I work with my folks, my colleagues, my peers to create a growth mindset? And then finally, how can I establish maybe a short hit list of things that I'd like to learn more about? Always, I believe, with the emphasis on starting small, to the question earlier on. So I have a question for you guys before I show you what we're doing with Beta, Gamma, Sigma. I want you in that chat bar to be thinking about this. And do forgive my animation here. It certainly wasn't my idea. But what is your biggest insight from today? So whilst I go through the next couple of slides, I would love you to think and reflect on that and line that chat bar until it breaks. So as Christina mentioned right at the outset, we at AICPA and CIMA are delighted to be partnering with Beta, Gamma, Sigma. And we have a plethora of awesome learning opportunities. In fact, we had so many, it was really difficult to focus on a couple that we could initially offer you. But we kind of came down to these two for some reasons. And let me talk to you about these particular two opportunities, just to give you a bit more depth. So the first one is emerging topics in finance. And really, this is open to everyone. It really covers things like how to successfully manage change, the importance of something that we really haven't discussed today, cyber security. And then it gives you a little taster in some of the emerging technologies like blockchain, like robot process automation, like what it means to have a data-driven mindset and artificial intelligence. Now, it doesn't go through those in a huge amount of depth, but it gives you at least a taster to be more curious about. So it's a very accessible learning opportunity. It doesn't take long. And then if you wanted to delve ever so sort of more deeply into things, then the digital mindset pack, the CJMAs, is an awesome learning opportunity. Chartered Global Management Accountant is a designation for business finance professionals. It's very prestigious around the world, has well over 100,000 people that have this. And as part of our member proposition, we offered this to all CJMAs globally, and we thought we'd love to do the same for you guys. So this goes a bit deeper into some of the technologies. For example, there's an hour and a half of learning around data-driven decision-making. We go into robot process automation in more depth, so you really understand the business imperatives it's trying to solve. That's about 2 to 2.5 hours worth of learning, all of which can be chunked down into sort of several components. And then finally, this thing that we really haven't touched upon today, but it's very intriguing, blockchain. You guys probably have heard of the thing called Bitcoin, some of the benefits, the value, and the opportunity. And I'm delighted that through the work that we're doing with Beta, Gamma, and Sigma, you can enjoy a nice, healthy discount off of those products. And depending on how you guys enjoy that, then we can think about other things as well. So those are the emerging technology opportunities. But let's all finally, and I'm going to unshare my screen here. Let's go to some of your insights. This is the cool bit. So let me see. Alrighty. So Laurie, love the way the three circles of opportunity visually framed us, motivating insights on how to move to that outside circle. Absolutely cool. Jackie, sorry, my technology skills here, guys. Wait for it, wait for it. The importance of educating myself about how other companies are using technology and thinking about the ability to bring that into my organization, automating processes that are currently taking a lot of people's time. Absolutely. Ada mentions the insight for me is how to adapt, evolve, and grow by using the tools provided. Hang on a minute, guys. I'm going to make this bigger. There we go. Now I can read it. Yeah, it's especially important as I'm deciding which path to follow in my career. No, that's really good, Ada. David, the idea of learning faster than technology change. It is a bit overwhelming to think of it like that, but I'm hoping that what we've been through today kind of allows us to work with that. Tracy, the importance of leveraging growth mindset allows you to focus on and deploy core goals. The idea of learning faster than technology changes again, David. Oh, sorry. Yep, gotcha. Martha, today's webinar gave me a wider perspective of today's business environment and how I can navigate it. Well, continue putting those little chats in, guys. It's lovely to get some instant feedback from you. I wonder if we have any, doesn't look like we've got any questions at this stage, unless anyone from the panel or Christina has one that they want to open up with. I thought as much.
That annoying student in class who always has questions, but I think obviously as we're looking through the chat, one of the key takeaways I think for a lot of people is the mindset, that growth mindset component.
Yeah.
And I have sort of a couple of questions around that concept. One, just as a leader myself, I wanted to share a resource that was really helpful for me in growing that growth mindset, and that is the book. It's very famous, but Mindset by Dr. Carol Dweck is an excellent resource. It's not just on the professional side, it's on the personal side as well, to kind of continue to cultivate that growth mindset. I'll drop it in the chat in case anyone is interested.
Thank you.
But one of the things that I frequently encounter as a leader myself, again, is I wonder if people are willing to have the vulnerability component that is necessary for curiosity. And of course, Dr. Brene Brown talks extensively about the vulnerability piece, the shame that might be associated with that. Have you, Nora and Barry, have either of you come across that? Or are you seeing maybe as a result of the pandemic, people are just more willing to be maybe a little more open about, hey, I don't know this, but I want to know more?
I'm going to give Nora the floor.
I would love to sort of tackle that. Thank you so much, Christina. And I always learn from these incredible sessions, and I hope all of you out there are, getting a few nuggets and takeaways. I don't come from an accounting background either, Christina, to your point. And when I started my career here at the association a year ago, I thought, my gosh, I've worked at universities for a long time and I have a certain skill set, but I'm not an accountant or finance professional. And it's amazing the kind of support. And when you're out there asking for support, it's amazing how many peers and colleagues want to help you. So don't be afraid to ask for help. Every now and again, someone might say no, but that's generally not what happens. People want to help other people. Building your confidence, staying curious will help you be aware, and being aware will help you build that confidence. And again, you don't have to be an expert in every single task, but being aware of what's out there, as Barry spoke about, is very helpful, sort of not being insular and having that sort of holistic viewpoint of your business and the industry as a whole. So Christina, I agree. I have been very humbled and vulnerable. And again, it's, as Dr. Brene Brown speaks about, it's not a deficit. It actually builds your courage and confidence. So go with confidence. We support you. Please LinkedIn with me as well. We have a wonderful CJMA LinkedIn finance and accounting community. And if you're interested in joining that, please connect with Barry and or myself, and we'll invite you to that as well. Thank you.
That's outstanding. Thank you, Nora. I find, perhaps you all as well, I find that is that kind of knowing it all is maybe one of the traps of leadership that you can easily fall into, where you almost feel like to be the leader that you need to be for your team, for your organization, you have to know everything about everything. And it couldn't be farther from the truth, in my opinion and in my experience. So I was also wondering, I was so intrigued by the formula, the L is greater than C squared. I actually wrote that down and sort of highlighted it myself. I'm wondering if, again, Barry, Nora, maybe both of you could possibly share some of your favorite resources that help you kind of upskill, keep in mind industry trends. Of course, it would be, you know, more industry specific, but do you all have favorite sources?
Nora, do you want to go and then I'll go?
Sure, absolutely. I find that, I'm coming from a higher education background. On LinkedIn, I follow Lumina Foundation. I'm involved with connected with a lot of education organizations, competency-based education. And so I want to hear what's going on in higher education, as well as what's going on in the accounting and finance industry and business industry as a whole. But I find that diversifying is very good, not having just one source. At the moment, I'm reading a book that's 20 years old, The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. It's an oldie and goodie, but my colleagues are starting to read a book called Think Again by Adam Grant. But I like to do a sort of a panoply and, some TED Talks and podcasts. I mean, I love NPR and I love just being curious. But I think networking is always key, and having a good conversation and collaboration is really key to helping to solidify and understand things. So that's sort of some of my tricks of the trade, if you will. Barry, what about you?
Well, we produce a wonderful newsletter called CJMA Advantage every day, and that provides really an aggregation of different things that are going on within finance, within accounting, within business, but more so around leadership. So there's always something that I'm very curious about that I post on LinkedIn just to share with people. So, and by the way, thank you so much for everyone that's linking in with me. I'm trying to accept whilst I'm speaking, but I just can't multitask, I'm afraid. One has to be intentional about one's time. So that for me, the CJMA Advantage is really, really cool. It's not just accounting and finance, it's about business. We do the hard work for you. We sort of aggregate things together, and a lot of it is around leadership. But I often think to myself that, working on and working out of the business, to Nora's point, if you can pick something, whether it's a book or a podcast or anything that is slightly outside of what you do in the mainstream. And I know it's really, really offbeat, but I love sporting books, and I love autobiographies, and I love leadership in sport. Apart from, I'm sorry, I don't know whether there's anyone from Boston here, but I'm not a big Patriots fan. But anyone else that there's so much that you can learn, and business meets sport so much. So there's a lot of business principles in the way that people coach high-performing teams, and vice versa. So that's something that I'm personally passionate about. Oh my goodness, Christina, I've seen the time.
Barry, before we wrap up, I was wondering, is the CGMA Advantage newsletter, is that something that people can just go and sign up for? Or is that something specifically for your organization?
No, it's open source. People should be able to sign up for it, yeah.
Great. And then also, if I could just give a little plug, we also have BGS Career Central on our website, which also is sort of a one-stop shop for just business, general leadership articles. Of course, this webinar will be housed there once the recording is available. So I would encourage everyone on the call to go check that out. We did have one follow-up question, one final question. I don't want to take too much time, and so I'll just read it very quickly, and if we could have just a quick answer, if you wouldn't mind. So she's in the process of growing her accounting firm, and she's trying to figure out how to reach, it was just answered, sorry. She's trying to figure out how to reach more people and grow her client base. Do you have any quick suggestions on maybe how to do that?
Yeah, Ada, what I'd love to do is if you link in with me, then I'll reach out to you outside of this, because we have lots of ideas, and yeah, I'd like to give you the time. So we'll connect after this, if that's all right. That's awesome. You got it.
Thank you so much for that. Well, Sophia, I think, wrapped it up really well. She said that she is revved after this, which I love to hear. I hope everybody walks away feeling inspired. Thank you, everyone, for joining. It has been an honor. Barry and Nora, thank you for sharing your insight with us. Great presentation. I'll probably have a million follow-up questions that I'll ask you on LinkedIn. So I encourage everyone else to do the same. So thank you all. And please check out our global events calendar for more events and our next webinar. So thank you all and have a great day.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you.